All right, welcome back to Drew and Me with Will Haddad. So we've talked about some of Will's favorite books. Talked about uh his new podcast. Can you remind me of the name again?
Yeah, it's called Therapy by the Book.
Therapy by the Book. Check it out. It's a brand new podcast and wherever you get your podcasts. Um, Absolutely check it out. Um, so Will, what is your favorite movie?
All right, my favorite movie. Oof, loaded question. I got a lot of movies I love. Got a lot of movies I love. But I do have a favorite. If we're talking live action, it's Forrest Gump.
Okay. I remember that was a favorite for you in college too.
I think,
Remember
yeah,
you really liked it.
I did. I did. I've loved it for years. Ever since I saw it for the first time. I was working at my first job at a video store. Remember those things? But I rented the DVD as an employee, watched it, when I want to say 16, 16 and a half maybe, and was just so moved by it. I loved it from start to finish, and that's remained a constant for me ever since. So it may well have been my favorite movie, even when we were in college together at that point.
Yeah. For me, Forrest Gump was just a VHS that we had at home for like pretty much that was one of our first VHSs that my parents purchased in 1994. And it was just kind of always on the shelf. And I think I watched like most of the VHSs we owned. So I just kind of put it on and like followed some of it. But I remember I was like four and I was watching it and I asked my parents or I asked my mom and my sister like why is the Jenny character acting that way when she's like really like into the 60s and she's very into drugs and like drug addicted like and they said she's just taking some medicine that's not good for her.
Hmm. Yeah, Jenny is a wonderful character, both in, her relationship with Forrest, but also in how how powerfully she embodies, I think, a lot of what people in the 60s were living, were doing with themselves. But she's also, we're probably almost certainly going to do an episode on Forrest Gump and Therapy by the Book and by extension Jenny. Um, but just thinking about it now, I think that she had a lot of childhood trauma that she was running away from in
Oh
the
yeah,
60s,
absolutely.
hands down. And that's really where most of her motivation to do the things that she does is coming from, though, she's not aware of it at least for the most part, on a conscious level, until very, very later in the story.
Yeah, I feel like Jenny's dad is pretty bad news.
Oh, he's not going to be winning Parent of the Year anytime soon. I'll say that much.
No, no. But it's great that she got to move in with her grandmother and she spent a lot of time with Forrest. Like pretty much throughout her whole life, she spends a lot of time with Forrest.
Yeah, he's a constant. He inadvertently becomes kind of an anchor figure in her life who is always there with that little reminder of both stability and one of the few positive things about her childhood that she had, even when things were at their worst.
Yeah. Um, and just saw this now, but Forrest is kind of Jesus. Like like he is kind of like a Jesus like type figure and like Jenny's kind of the Mary who has the Immaculate Conception.
That's interesting. I mean, it is true that Forrest is very much a character who always wants for nothing from the very beginning. He never sets out to achieve anything aside from just doing whatever feels right for him and for the people he loves. And as a result, he ends up having this, incredibly successful, adventurous, prolific life that's full of accomplishment, full of achievement, full of, front row seats, literally, in some cases, to all the major historical events America went through in the 60s and 70s. But Forrest, he's never that was never his goal. He was never out to be Jesus. He was never out to be somebody who changed the course. He was just in it um to just be himself from the get-go. And it is true. You do get the sense that he likes helping people and is always happy to or willing at least to be of assistance. So yeah, that's a very interesting. So that's maybe one of the few times where a Jesus metaphor is appropriate in Hollywood.
Yeah, like he just has a very kind nature about him and just very naturally is very curious, but doesn't always know like what he's getting into, but he'll just do it and like pretty passionate and will just kind of, you know, he has good instincts. Like I feel like he innately has very good instincts. And he might not be able to reason everything out or think about it like logically, but he's very instinctual and I feel like that helps him a lot.
hmm Yeah, it's true. He operates by intuition a lot of the time, because his I mean he characterizes it as him not being smart, but that's of course not true. He's very smart. He's very insightful, but his style of communication and his style, the way he perceives the world, is just a little different from most other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Forrest Gump is also a book. Have you read the
It
book,
is, which
Will?
I have not. I have not read the book. I need to do that too. I'm almost wary to read the book because I love the movie so much. I don't want that perspective shifted or altered in any way, though I'm sure the book's marvelous.
Yeah, I know they've the book right at my local library. So yeah, I should try to check it out at some point. But
Let me know if you do. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of think about it the same way you do. Like I kind of want to keep the movie like really special and I don't want anything to like but if you think about the book as its own thing, it's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's rare, and I don't. I'm not saying this is the case for Forrest Gump, but it is possible sometimes for there to be a movie that's better, I think, than the book it's based on, even though typically the opposite holds true. I've seen a handful of films where and read the book, and I was like, the movie's better. The movie just did a better job of realizing these characters for who they are and telling their stories as such.
Feel like Forrest Gump, just master filmmaker Robert Zemeckis and master screenwriter Eric Roth. Like you
hmm
just have like the perfect marriage of like director and screenwriter to come up with this amazing product.
You do. And it's a film that for being so simple in its presentation and style, somehow manages to encapsulate this vast swath of time, of emotion, and of American culture. That's what I love so much about it, is that Forrest is the everyman, and you feel almost like you could have been there with him on all of these moments. That is what I think the one part of the movie's message is about, is that sense of connection between us that can sometimes go beyond even time.
Yeah, like you know, like for kids or for people like us who didn't get to live through the 60s, like it is a good window into it. It is a good snapshot.
Absolutely.
Um, and
And
also
the soundtrack
the
helps to hammer that home too.
70s and 80s. Yeah, the soundtrack's great. And somehow they make war like a big part of the movie too, which like war often like takes up a whole film or something. Like to be able to concisely get into like the Vietnam War in Forrest Gump is like amazing how they do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I've often thought about that. I hadn't seen quite as many war movies when I saw Forrest Gump for the first time as I have now, but even now, looking back and thinking about that section of the movie, you have to hand it to the film for being able to show, Vietnam and to not shirk away from the squalor or the brutality or the danger of it. But also at the same time, it never quite makes the movie about war. The movie's not a war film, even though what it shows of war is for a PG-13 film, very close to the essence of what that awful ordeal for the men over there was like. Um, and you can't talk about the 60s or the 70s for that matter of American history without at least talking about Vietnam by extension too. And the movie really does a marvelous job of pacing and enfolding that aspect of the narrative into all the other elements, even to the point where we see how Vietnam affects Forrest and Lieutenant Dan when they both come home afterwards, and you have a lot of the anti-war rallies uh and Forrest getting his Medal of Honor and just all of the aftermath as it happens.
Yeah, like the anti-war stuff that goes on after is like pretty intense. Kind of remind me of the movie Across the Universe, or like go out too. I think it's a great movie.
Yeah, it's
Um,
a beautiful film. Very subtle nod I've always liked in Forrest Gump too, that it's very brief, but it's the reference to Midnight Cowboy, where it's when Forrest is staying with Lieutenant Dan in New York, and briefly they play the song. I forget the name of it, but it's the one that goes, "Everybody's talking about me." Uh,
yup.
they play that song like for 10
Harry Nilsson's the
seconds.
artist. I think it's a Harry Nilsson song.
Yes, yes, that's right. They only play it for like 10 seconds in Forrest Gump, but they play it, constantly throughout Midnight Cowboy, which is set in New York and features a very kind of similar relationship between um, Dustin Hoffman and uh, what's his name? The main character of that film.
John Voight.
John Voight, thank you. John Voight. Um, and the just the parallels there, if you for those with eyes to see it are is a very very charming tongue-in-cheek reference in Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Refresh my memory, Will. What part of the movie does that take place?
That's in it's about two-thirds of the way through. It's after Forrest has come back from Vietnam and he's met up with Lieutenant Dan in New York for the first time since they've both been discharged.
Oh, okay. Is it when he sees him in the wheelchair and he's like, "Yeah, I like you," and like made a fool of himself on TV?
Yeah, it's literally the scene after that. It's literally the
Okay.
scene after that because it's easy
Okay.
to miss because the music Forrest is doing voiceover. He's going, I stayed with Lieutenant Dan for Christmas over the holidays in New York. Yeah, you was always talking about going down to the VA or whatnot. So you're focused on Forrest, but it clearly in the background you hear the Harry Nilsson song, and they're walking through the streets of New York, and Lieutenant Dan's being all aggressive at the cab drivers, and and the contrast is unmistakable because Lieutenant Dan's in his wheelchair, Forrest is much taller, pushing him, which is evokes tiny Dustin Hoffman and John Voight towering over him. So it's like. You know, how could you not catch the reference if you've seen Midnight Cowboy?
Yeah. I did not make that connection, but I feel like that's a really good connection, and I feel like it's very kind of like, you know, it just speaks back to like the strength of like character relationships, and you just get the perfect like contrasting characters, and you kind of come together, and then they go on an incredible journey.
Mhm. Yeah, Forrest and Lieutenant Dan's relationship in that movie is one of my favorite things about it, actually, is the evolution of their friendship over the course of the movie. Leading up to just that so beautiful, tender exchange between them at the very end at Forrest's wedding.
Yeah, I was thinking about that recently, how Lieutenant Dan shows up and he's like, and at the wedding he can walk, that's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, he's got his new legs, his new magic legs. And he's, engaged to that, beautiful young Asian woman, Susan, who I don't, they don't specify whether she's, Vietnamese or not, but it's noticeable that after fighting in a war against a culture that's at least similar to hers, if not the same, now he's found someone that he loves, that he wants to be with from that very same place.
Yeah. Um, just a quick plug. There's a great charity that Gary Sinise does for wounded warriors, I think. He, I've donated to it in the past. It's great. I think it's just the Gary Sinise Foundation, but it is a
Hmm.
wonderful charity. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, Gary Sinise
Yeah.
is a wonderful man. Definitely second that.
Oh yeah. I feel like Will, you like maybe not as high as Forrest Gump, but would Apollo 13 would that be pretty high too?
That's my third favorite film. So you are correct. You are bang on point. It's not Forrest, but it is the top three.
Oh.
And Gary Sinise is a big part of why that is so.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a good movie too. And like I think about that movie, and I also kind of think about Kevin Bacon, and Kevin Bacon had this great thing on YouTube the other day. He did The Last Meals with Josh Scherer, which is part of Good Mythical Morning, and it goes through Kevin Bacon's last meal, and he just kind of like tells his life story of like growing up in Philadelphia, and his dad was like a city planner and stuff like that. So, just really like cool information Kevin Bacon, about Kevin Bacon, and he's in a new show called The Bondsman.
Oh yes, I've seen trailers for that. That looks really cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's like kind of the gateway to hell or something weird like that.
Yeah, he's like a sort of a collector, a soul toll collector for the devil or something of that sort.
Um, cool. So just just to kind of wrap up a bit, Will, what is your favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show is Mad Men.
Saw the first season. I didn't see season two. I heard it really picks up later. And I think that Don Draper is an excellent protagonist. And like you were saying before with like Forrest Gump, as it's a good window into like a different time period.
Yeah, I love
Mad
Mad
Men like
Men for a
really
lot of
sends you
this.
in a different time period.
It does. I love it for a lot of the same reasons I love it for Forrest Gump, actually. It takes place, during that same time period, but it's stretched out because it's a TV series. So you get a lot more in-depth looks at various aspects of society. It's also a very different group of people than in Forrest Gump. But where the magic of where that really shines is the script. Every single line of dialogue tends to have at least three different layers of interpretation. There's what you're hearing, then there's how the character interprets it, and then there's how you can interpret the line based on something that happened, 5 episodes ago. That's suddenly now being echoed back to in a level of subtext that only the audience and maybe one or two other characters are conscious of. It's just that this majestic web of intricacy that shines through every single episode with the dialogue, with the characters and what they're doing and the lives that they're leading, and with the detail of the world. I mean, the production team went all out to the point that they would actually research what the weather was like at this particular time of the year in 1965, whenever this episode is supposed to take place. I mean, they went out of their way to make this show feel like a time capsule of American history, and it shows.
Yeah, I like totally agree. I like the episode from season one that's like the most poignant to me is when they're showing Don Draper like he does kind of the home movies with the old camera and like stuff like that. And I thought like that was kind of a really beautiful way to do an episode.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and many of the pitch scenes that you see him and the other people at the ad agency um going through were actually taken from real life accounts of actual advertising salesmen who they would interview as consultants for the show. So some of the big ones, like if you get to season 6, there's a pitch they make for Hershey's that I think is almost point for point identical to an actual sales pitch made historically. And they even
Okay.
show footage from old commercials that were actually produced and published by some of these companies here and there as well.
Mm. So Will, not to give you too much homework, but there's a show that's kind of the female version of Mad Men. It's called Good Girls Revolt. It's on Amazon, and it's about the writer's room for a fictional magazine that's just like Time. So they're competing with Time, or it could even be like USA Today. Yeah, I think it's like a competitor of like Time and USA Today. But yeah, it's called Good Girls Revolt, and it's just like that same writer's room, but it's from like the female perspective and like the ladies who work in the pit, and then they want like their own byline and like stuff like that. And so there's like a big like civil rights movement for women's rights, and they get a lawyer and well, yeah, and things just kind of like take off from there. But it's also like really good insight into kind of the late 60s.
I'll have to check it out. Thank you, Drew. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah, man. For Mad Men, I'll have to like go back to season two. Since I
Do it.
think I
Do
just
it.
stopped at one. So yeah.
You won't regret it.
All right.
Amazing show.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay. Um, so Will, um, I know you don't have Facebook, correct?
No, not on social media at the moment.
Okay. So we can't follow you on Instagram or anything like that.
Not yet, but the podcast, if you want to check it out, it's on Apple Podcasts, so you can follow that through the app, or it's on Spotify. We upload to all the major directories. And I mean, if you want to know about what I do professionally as a therapist, just you do a Google search, William Haddad, Haddad. You can find my website. I'm on psychologytoday.com or Hello Alma, which I know is another directory that's nationwide. So yeah, if you're listening and you're curious, I'm not hard to find. Just have to know where to look.
Okay. Yeah, check out Will's new podcast, Therapy by the Book, um, wherever you get your podcasts. And Will, thank you so much for being on today. This was a lot of fun. I know, like you and I haven't caught up in a while, so it's really fun, Will. I had a great time.
Thank you, Drew. My pleasure. I'm really honored to be on the show, and it was great catching up with you too. Appreciate it.
Cool. This has been the Drew and Me podcast with Drew and Will Haddad. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Thanks.